Meeting of the Canyon Regional Water Authority to order. Do a roll call as our first item. I am here. Ted Gibbs.
Here.
Martin Poor.
Here.
Gary Gilbert. Abigail Maybury. Humberto Ramos. Teresa Shield.
Here.
Donald Bosworth.
Here.
Regina Frankie.
Here.
Paul Bricker.
Here.
Brendan Rohan.
Here.
Mark Gilbert.
Here.
Mayor Al Suarez. Steve Cooper. Nick Sherman. Stephen Fonville. James Forcell. Doris Stubing. Abel Vaughn. Clint Ellis.
Here.
Mayor Martin Poor, I'm sorry I didn't refer to you as Mr. Mayor, so I'll start doing that.
Call me whatever you want. Oh, straight up. I'm good.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I show 14. That is a quorum. Thank you very much. None online? We don't have anyone online. Is that correct? Thank you. You'd bow your heads for an invocation, please. Heavenly Father, we once again come to you to give you thanks for the many blessings we each enjoy. We ask that you guide us tonight as we meet to discuss the business at hand for Canyon Regional Water Authority. We ask that you watch over the men and women of Canyon Regional Water Authority and of all of our utility systems, that you protect them and you guide them each day. We pray that you continue to grace us with strength and stamina, wisdom and knowledge as we live our lives, and give us grace all with good health. We ask this in your son's name. Amen. Please stand for pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Sorry, that one's not that one.
Before we get the meeting rolling today, I wanted to just visit with everybody and say that tonight, unless some special circumstance arises, we're going to limit all the discussion tonight with just the trustees in attendance. We've been kind of getting out of our norm and allowing more and more people to speak from the gallery. In all essence, this is a trustees meeting, unless there's a specific item on there where a trustee has someone speaking for them. We're going to limit the conversation to just the trustees at the table. Item 4, oath and statement of office of new trustee. I've already taken care of that. I'd like to welcome Paul Bricker to our Board of Trustees representing East Central. Thank you for being here, and we've already taken care of that, and he has signed off, so he is now a trustee. Welcome. Thank you. Item 5, public comments. Comments on non-agenda items. No discussion from the board. 3-minute time limit. Comments on specific items on this agenda. Discussion from and with the board may be allowed. 3-minute time limit per citizen. Time may not be shared or ceded to another citizen. Members of the public wishing to make a public comment during the meeting must register by emailing hdiaz@crwa.com prior to the meeting. Written comments may also be submitted. If you wish to speak, please state your name. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience that wishes to make a comment or speak at this time. Do I have anybody wishing to speak? Yes, sir. How are you today? Name, sir? Yes, sir. Can you grab the microphone right there, sir?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Our company submitted a bid a couple of months ago in regards to agenda item 10F on the Hayes Caldwell project. And we wanted to come and just talk about that for a few minutes. So we have a history of work with Canyon Regional.
Can I stop you for 1 second, sir, just for one moment? Is it okay if we have one of the bidders speaking at the confirm? Please continue. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you. So we have a history of work with Canyon Regional, and we've had a good relationship with Canyon Regional. We built a project out here at the water treatment plant, a 750,000 gallon tank in 2016. We also did 2 projects, one at Wagner, one at Leisner, 2 2 million gallon tanks, also projects that we did with Canyon Regional. One of those was very successful. The other one we had a little bit of challenges with, but we did complete the project successfully. And we've also done successful work with a lot of members in this room. We submitted a bid for this current project, which was the Hayes Caldwell project, and we were about 7.5% low on price. And so we were surprised to learn that Canyon Regional might be wanting to award that project to our competitor. Obviously, we fell short on some of the other criteria somewhere. So we wondered to ourselves, how we might have done a better job on our proposal, because we value our relationship with Canyon Regional. We do feel like we had the best value on that proposal, and we wanted to come in front of this board and ask that question and learn how we might have been more successful.
Thank you, sir. My recommendation, if you would like, set up a meeting with our interim general manager, Randy Schwen, and maybe he can sit down with you and kind of go over what your bid looked like, and maybe they would have some answers for you at that point in time.
Okay.
All right?
Is it, may I ask a question? Thank you. Is it incumbent on this board to take the recommendation of the Board of Managers?
It is a practice of this board to seriously consider the recommendation for the board of managers as well as the construction committee.
What answer to that question? No, this board may.
Thank you, Trey.
Yeah, because, as you can see it from our standpoint, we've had very successful projects with Canyon Regional as well as many members of Canyon Regional's boards. And so we're just wondering if there might be further consideration given to our proposal, given the fact that we were 7.5% low, $350,000. It's no small sum. And we have a long history of successful projects in the state of Texas and in the surrounding area.
Appreciate that comment. I guess we'll see how the discussion goes when that item comes up on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else from the public wish to speak this evening? Last chance. Hearing none, we'll close public comments and we'll move on to item 6, consent agenda items. All items listed below are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the board and will be considered by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered as part of the order of business. We have 2 items, CRWA 24-02-009, concerning approval of the minutes from the January 8th, 2024 Board of Trustees meeting, and B, CRWA 24-02-010, concerning approval of the financial and check register reports presented at the last meeting, and that would be the December financial reports and check registers. Do I have any motions or comments?
Brandon Rohan, I'd like to pull the minutes for a minor correction.
Second.
Thank you. We need a vote on that, Trey? Pull them? No? All right, we're going to pull those. Item B, is there any discussion on item B?
Motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Brandon Rohan, I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that's unanimous. We'll go back to item 6A. Brandon?
Under Board of Trustees, Randy Schwen is listed as a Board of Trustee, but on January 8th, he was not a Board of Trustee member.
We can make that adjustment.
Motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve the minutes from the prior meeting with an amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Hearing none. Thank you.
Nothing personal, Randy.
And Stephen Fonville, nice to see you. I've checked the box. Slowly gathering folks here. Moving on, item 7, presentation discussion. The President of the Board of Trustees will appoint members to the Evaluation Select Committee for the RFQs for General Construction Design Engineering. That's on me. Do I have any volunteers that wish to do this before we start appointing people? Great. Nick Sherman is now the chair of that committee. Thank you for raising your hand. Have anybody else wishing to serve on this committee? Mr. Gilbert, would you like to serve on this committee? Excellent. Ms. Vaughn, can we get you to serve on that committee?
Oh, Mr. Fonville out 9-1 Monday. Probably that would not be a good idea.
All right. Anyone else wish to volunteer to be on this committee? It's really important that we get these things taken care of. General construction design engineers, review of RFQs.
Why don't you appoint people who aren't here?
Oh, those, great suggestion.
Those are not going to show up at that meeting either. That might be a challenge. We're just filling it with empty chairs. Anybody else? Mr. Bricker, can I entice you to join a committee?
Oh, you can.
Add Mr. Bricker to that. We'd like to get one more on here if we can. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. I believe we now have a committee. And Nick, I appreciate the fact you volunteered to be chair.
Volunteered first.
Raised your hand. All right, the president of the board of trustees will appoint members of the evaluation and selection committee for the RFQs for construction administration for the Hayes Caldwell Water Treatment Plant. Do I have any volunteers for that, Doris? I know. You can. Thank you. That's 2. I have Tracy Shield. That's 3. I need at least
For a while.
one more.
I'll do it.
Thank you very much, Regina. We have 4. Which of you would like to be considered the board chair?
Committee chair.
Committee chair. Board chair.
Or board chair.
Or board chair. Hey,
Oh, okay.
congratulations, Tracy. Thank you
Okay.
thank you very much for stepping up to the plate. In the past, I've reached out to people and kind of asked people behind the scenes, but on these, I want to do it publicly to see who else is willing to step up and volunteer. I think it's important that we all kind of carry the load here. Otherwise, the same 7 or 8 people are on the same committees over and over again. We're really not shedding the load to everybody else. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, and I'd like to make a quick comment. I'm glad to see these committees. I think it's very helpful to have board interaction with staff on selecting these. And we didn't have that very much in the last few years, and I'm happy to see it now.
Thank you all. 7C, status of discussions concerning amended and restated regional Hayes Caldwell County area water supply and treatment contract dated February 9th, 2021. Ms. Stubing, you put this on the agenda. Move that to item H, so that's going to be 11H. Yes. No, 10H. Move to 10H. I'm okay with that.
But just to be clear, we're going to move the discussion to item 10H, but this item can't be converted to an action item. This is still, is
It's just part of that overall.
that correct, Mr. Stevens?
All right, 7D, litigation pending against Crystal Clear SUD. It's the HK Ball Ranch LLC versus Crystal Clear Special Utility District as it relates to the Hayes Caldwell and amended and restated regional Hayes Caldwell County area water supply and treatment contract dated February 9th, 2021. Again, Ms. Stubing.
Crystal Clear can show, they had means of contract, but also whatever additional quality they chose to take from the Hayes Caldwell plant in order to provide water to the developer. The fact that Crystal Clear committed more than its allocated share of the plant's capacity to a developer shows their priority is serving developers, and they will do so to the detriment of other participating members, which consists of San Marcos, who's a part of it, Martindale, County Line, Maxwell. That is 4 member entities of this organization whose water rights have implicated in a federal lawsuit due to Crystal Clear's actions. I don't know where they contracted for 700 acre feet. They only have 500 coming out of the plant. I don't know where the others was going to come from, but everybody has requested their allotted amount of water. We're not going to have any to give up. I don't think County Line, Martindale are going to have any to give up either. So this is a big problem.
I've got a question, Mr. Foos. So it's my understanding, you were subpoenaed. I'd like to know if, maybe we need to go to executive session and talk about the liability that Canyon Regional has with regards to this litigation, if there's any liability, but I'd like our attorney to basically tell us what does that subpoena mean and what ultimately are we looking at with regards to any adverse actions to Canyon Regional? And possibly take it up in executive session.
To me for an answer. We did, here, let me tell you what I can tell you without divulging any privileges, and then you can make it how you want to handle it. So Mr. Foos, in his capacity as the president of CRWA, received a subpoena for certain documents as a non-party to the federal litigation between Crystal Clear. That subpoena was turned over to me, and I've met with staff to formulate a strategy for gathering responsive documents. I will tell you that the subpoena is almost entirely directed at documents related to the 2015 contract between CRWA and SUDS with respect to the Alliance water. My understanding is that the Alliance received a substantially similar, Mr. Morris right there, received a substantially similar subpoena, which is really just a request for documents. It's not uncommon. It doesn't name CRWA as a party and doesn't appear to be any threat towards CRWA. I have pulled the pleadings in the lawsuit, and by my reading, it's a dispute between a developer and Crystal Clear concerning a contract, essentially whether or not Crystal Clear entered in good faith into a utility service agreement, whether or not changed circumstances justified pricing and water deviations from what was originally discussed in the utility service agreement. I don't believe at this point there's any reason to believe that Canyon might become a party. We obviously have to respond to a federal court subpoena. We can't blow that off, but it doesn't appear that we even have many responsive documents. Or would like to have more specific discussion about that in executive session. I'm happy to answer those questions. Now it's just we're a witness.
I have a question. When did CRWA become knowledgeable about this lawsuit? It was filed in January of 23. We're in January 24 now. So
Documents in relation to RWA approximately a week ago,
You were served on February 2nd, I believe.
10 days ago.
I learned from Mr. Foos when he received a subpoena about the existence of the lawsuit.
It named me as the president and it didn't have anybody delivered to here, so they delivered it to my office and I delivered it to Trey. I don't have any CRWA documents in any way, shape, or form as a repository at my office.
So our response to the subpoena is due on February the 23rd. And the staff, we formulated a strategy with Mr. Schwinn and his staff as to gathering documents. Obviously, we're going to have a review of them ahead of time, and then we'll produce whatever documents we might That should be the end of Canyon Regional's involvement in the lawsuit. Potentially, certain CRWA staff members or maybe even board members might become deponents. In other words, if someone wants to take a deposition. But again, because the water related to the subpoena is Alliance water, we just don't have a whole heck of a lot of documents.
It's Alliance Water? Is it?
Oh, how?
So I've read the lawsuit, and the lawsuit, to your point, Ms. Stebbing, definitely represents the Hayes Caldwell project. The subpoena that we've received doesn't. All of the documents that are requested present all relate to the 2015 SUD contract. So that's what it is now. Obviously, the parties have an opportunity to issue new subpoenas or expand the scope of questions that are being asked. But as of today, all that's on the table with respect to Canyon Regional is documents related to the 2015, what I call the sub-agreements between the SUD, CRWA for the distribution of the Alliance.
I don't think we need to go to executive session. I just have one follow-up question. Will we be abreast when we get subpoenaed again? Or how do we be informed that our board or boards members are being subpoenaed? Who's going to inform us, or who's going to keep us abreast of what's going on with this?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure any one of the member organizations here has a obligation to tell you if they've been served in a lawsuit unless we're trying to set a precedent here. So
I
No,
think
no,
Roberto's
I'm
question's
asking
a
about
little
this
different.
board,
So
this
if
board.
you would like for somebody to make a report to the board when there's developments in this lawsuit or other litigation involving members, the obvious choice would be the general manager. If you'd like to assign that to me, I'm happy to take on that. Like I said, we received this, I think, on February 2nd. It was Mr. Foos's first day back at work after a medical leave.
literally,
Welcome
Welcome
back to
back.
the office with us.
here's a document for you. And they'd been all over City Hall and basically been to about 3 different places trying to figure out where my office was. I was getting phone calls from staff before they even got to me with the subpoena, so.
I'm just having difficulty understanding how Hayes Caldwell is mentioned in here, but you're telling me it's Alliance water.
That's what the subpoena asked for.
So I think you better go back and
I,
Have me
I read the
clarify that.
entire document and Trey's read the entire document.
subpoena,
I'm
but
quite sure.
something doesn't match up.
Well, the lawsuit itself makes allusions to the fact that water to be supplied to the developer was the. So I know that Crystal Clear has multiple sources of water. At some point, if you believe the lawsuit, and it's important to understand, a lawsuit is an advocacy piece written by a lawyer. I filed a lawsuit against Tri-Hydro, and I can promise you, they don't believe everything I wrote in the lawsuit is. But this petition alleges that there was a changing price tag and changing source of supply identified by Crystal Clear for the water. And it does reference Hayes Caldwell as one of the originally discussed. But the subpoena that was directed to Canyon Regional doesn't even mention. I believe the same is true of the subpoena directed to the Alliance. I don't know whether the allegations have changed, whether the subpoena is a rifle shot request for a specific category. It doesn't include the Hayes Caldwell document. The only thing that's even broader than those SUD agreements is the request, like I said, for all of the Board of Trustees meetings from.
Well, I just had a big concern if they contracted for 700 acre feet out of the Hayes Caldwell plant. They only have 500.
I don't.
And I think they're using all 500 already now because they're going over the limit
I
every
don't believe
time.
that was their intent. Their intent was that water was gonna come from multiple sources, including the Edwards. I believe they have some Trinity wells they're working on perfecting. They have Arwell water. They have water from here. There's multiple sources of water. So I think to conclude without having all those documents in on where they were saying the water's coming from might be a little premature. I don't think they ever intended that all 700 acre foot would come from one place when they don't have access to that contractually. So I mean, I'm just saying, I think you have to assume that they were talking about water coming from multiple locations, not one location. I would just have to assume that based, because they listed multiple sources in the document.
Do we feel, I guess, Trey, the question I have for you, Trey, maybe it should go in executive session, but we feel Crystal Clear's interpretation of this contract has any bearing on this lawsuit? Has any interpretation, has any adverse effect to the lawsuit, to our contract? Your interpretation as you know it today?
Is the question, does Crystal Clear's interpretation of the Hayes Caldwell contract have any bearing on its position in the lawsuit? The answer is I don't know. Lawsuit is one that I would characterize, perhaps mischaracterize in Crystal Clear's. It's almost a reverse 1926 B case. The developer has filed suit, or the developers, the plaintiff, and they're essentially asking for relief from the court to say, well, 1926 B protect applied to Crystal Clear because of X, Y, and Z. So I've not read all of the documents. Mr. Terrell did hand me a preliminary injunction. So I don't want to make representations about it, but it does look like the court has at least addressed one of the 1926 B questions. Physical capability to provide service. Obviously, there's a much more detailed analysis. Part of that is, even if you got the pipes in the ground, you have to have water to put into the pipes. I don't know what the utility service agreement between Crystal. You understand that the scope of the development has changed at residential development, and subsequently it's been described as a mixed-use development, meaning it'll have both residential and commercial. Obviously, that's going to change the water requirements and the storage requirements and all of those things. So how Crystal Clear plans to supply water to that particular developer, I have no idea. That's a question. I don't know whether or not their interpretation has anything to do with it.
Questions on this? Doris, any other comments on this?
No, I just want clarification on who's included. If the petition is wrong, then it needs to be corrected. If Alliance is in there, then Alliance needs to be inserted. I don't know.
Alliance was served with
No.
similar documents that we were served with? That's the same advice that Trey gave me. He said, basically, this is what they're asking for. We basically provided it's a federal lawsuit. Wasn't onerous. It was fairly brief in what it's wanting because we don't have a lot of documents. The hardest one probably to assemble is probably all the minutes from 2018 through current, which are public record anyway. So it's not like there's anything in here that's privileged or questioned or requires an opinion from the Attorney General or anything like that. It's literally just, it's essentially public documents. So I don't see where we are at this point in time, where there's a great risk. And I had a conversation with Trey, 'cause I was concerned that they served me, and he said they served you only because your name's listed as president. That's all. It wasn't me. It was, they wanted CRWA. And it was my day, first day back. And I was like, man, came back too soon.
Crystal Clear's present too. Have we mischaracterized anything about the nature of the suit?
Been guided by our attorney to read those matters.
I'm trying to, and Paul, you and I had a conversation before the meeting, so I'm really trying to kind of, and it's not that I'm trying to stifle the conversation, but if we start that, once we do it for one, we have to do it for everybody, and pretty soon we're gonna have a 5-hour meeting, and I'm not sure
Well,
that.
sir, this is a situation where we have ongoing litigation, that Crystal Clear has no obligation to share with anybody else in this room, including, has nothing to do with the Hayes Caldwell contract. It has an old contract, that we're negotiating with, and this, so it's not something that impacts Hayes Caldwell. It's not something that impacts the current contractual problems that we're having with the other partners. Talk about that in public.
And you've said exactly what you need to say on that. We're good? as can be. I don't think we need to go into executive session. Do you, at this point in time? We're not gonna get anything more from what we,
I don't.
I just think just the updates would be helpful.
And I'm certainly happy to do that. So just in case I didn't say it earlier, I think I did, but our response is due on the 23rd. We'll have the documents assembled prior to that. Prior to that time, I'll report back at the next meeting how many documents we coughed up. I mean, it's a federal suit, so it's a public record, but it appears to me that the contract in dispute in the suit is not any of the water supply agreements.
I just find it odd. Crystal Clare's trying to lease more water from us, and we already told them we don't have any water to lease, so.
any other comments on this before we roll on to the next item?
Hold on.
Thank you. Notice and demand letter received, this is, 7E, notice and demand letter received from County Line Special Utility District on August 13th, 2023, related to the Hayes Caldwell project, Humberto Ramos.
I just wanted to put this on the agenda. I don't know if we need to go to H, but again, it's been since August, and I obviously wear two hats, just like everyone around this table wears two hats. My concern is Canyon Regional. Obviously, you got this demand letter. There's another demand letter, like we're collecting these like baseball cards. I mean, what is the progress on this demand letter, County Line? And what has been done? I see these emails that you've sent, Mr. Gr- in 6 months. My understanding there is some action staff has taken with regards to filing for a defund application. Good, but again, it's taking 6 months to get to a defund application. What is Canyon Regional doing to prevent our position for something like this? And we have updates on this.
I see you looking at me, and I'm happy to field the
Well, I mean,
question. I
'cause-
think it's kind of a staff question. So as you see from my email chain with County Line's attorney, I was responsive immediately with Mr. Gershon. Responsive with me, and we had a couple of positive conversations that we haven't gotten back yet, at least to my knowledge. At some point, not too long after mid-September or maybe late, Hoffman said that the communication met with either you or another representative of County Line. I think at some point, Mr. Rohan met with a representative of County Line. It hasn't been put back into my field until this agenda item came up and I was asked for any sort of records. As I know, it's being handled on a staff level and a board level, and if that's not satisfactory to County Line, I think probably a meeting. Your concerns are valid and they're pretty clear. Do Mr. Ramos believe that it requires an attorney dialogue at this point, or?
Again, I'm torn between two, right? Let's take off the Canyon Regional head. If you're asking me as County Line, yes. I think attorneys are part of the process, but again, staff and how this moves forward, there's really is no movement. And we've had discussions. Questions you're asking apparently have been addressed, with regards to some of those questions you asked. So stuff you sent in here, including here, has no bearing. I mean, it's already been resolved as to where this take point should be. Let me put my Canyon Regional hat on here. There needs to be some type of resolution to this. What is this board going to do with regards to this demand letter? It's up to staff, and if staff fails, ultimately we're held accountable. What do we do?
I think that the appropriate thing to do for the process, he's the general. I'm always a phone call away or a text message away. If you want me to get involved from Canyon Regional's part, I'm happy to. I've known Mr. Gershon for almost 30 years. I'm happy to work with him too. Some of the things, as you know, lawyers don't have the answers to. We have to call the client and get the answer. And so if you can save that step, that would obviously be more desirable, but we're here to facilitate the process. I agree, the letter's grown stale, probably why you wanted it on the agenda, and I'm glad that you brought it to everybody's attention again. There's been a lot of tumult, but now we have a new manager. Urge you to include him in the process. If that doesn't work, give it back to us.
Whenever anybody sends a demand letter, at least we could do is the courtesy of responding.
And we did. So there's emails and there's not a formal letter, but certainly there's an email. The letter I think is dated for Mr. Gershon, August 31st. I was on vacation and wrote back right away and said, hey, I'm on vacation. Then I responded on the 7th of September. About a week later, he and I spoke the next morning. But it certainly wasn't ignored. And we did put this on the agenda letter just so the board would know right away, which has become our practice. Anytime we receive a demand letter, collecting like baseball cards, unfortunately. It has become the practice to put them on the agenda. We got a demand letter today. It was obviously too late to put it on the agenda, but we had copies out available in the lobby, and that's the way that we are handling things and the way I believe we should handle things. Nothing should be swept under the rug, and everybody should know when there's a potential threat to Canyon Regional. I think it's very important. I'm glad you brought this back up, and like I said, if it doesn't work out by talking directly with Mr. Schwinn, let me know how I can help. I'm happy to work with you or Mr. Gershon.
Item 8A. Excuse me. Item 8, CRW staff reports, update from written reports by staff, legal counsel, and others. A drought report. Do you have any updates on the drought report that's in the packet?
Yeah, we kind of changed around.
I got a question for staff. Do we have a weather station here located on? No? Can I make a recommendation that we spend $300-400 and get a decent weather station that can be mounted here, which can give you a tremendous amount of data to reference what's going on directly here at the plant? If we have access to that data directly, there's no need to buy one.
Right.
I stand corrected. No, I know. I just didn't know if we had one that measured water here. We had a rough idea of what we're seeing versus what anybody else is seeing in the region, because, the rains that rolled through the other day, Cibolo got 9/10 of an inch and Seguin got 6. So, I mean, sometimes it could be pouring down the street and doesn't rain at your house. You know what I mean?
As long as it's budgeted.
Did staff create the slide 4 here with the projections of the lake level? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I like seeing it. Thank you. Yeah, it's green. We're going.
Any other comments in reference to A, the drought report? Hearing none, we'll move on to B, water treatment, storage, and transmission operation. This is staff again, Lake Dunlap, Hayes Caldwell, and Wells Ranch.
You look at the next page, after the precipitation, you'll see that there's a summary of Lake Dunlap, Wells Ranch, and Hayes Caldwell. The details were given to the Board of Managers last week. And if you have any specific question, give me a call or talk to the manager. They all received the details on that. Yes. I'm sorry? Not in this, but we can get them. It's not a problem.
Any questions in relation to the report on water treatment, storage, and transmission? Line treatment contract and groundwater leak.
We can cover this now, or we can wait until we get into the, 20, D, that'd be 10D. We can cover that
We'll
part
cover it
there.
and We'll cover, I know what you're about, Rich. We'll cover that. Nothing else, no other updates on that? Comments on that item? Hearing none, we'll move on to 8D, South Texas Regional Water Planning Group, Region L. Staff,
They're gonna have their meeting, I think it's Wednesday morning, and so I'll be attending that, from now on.
any comments or question on 8D, South Texas Regional Water Planning Group? None. We'll move on to EGMA 13.
They canceled their meeting last Friday, but they're gonna have one in March, and, they got a new GAM coming out. So we're gonna be looking at, what that results of that, GAM result, for flows and things. So I'll be attending that.
Thank you, sir. Any questions on GMA 13? 8F, Groundwater Districts of Guadalupe and Gonzales County staff.
Cover that too.
Going to cover that in 10. Thank you. And 8G, legal and legislative matters. And tonight we just have Trey here tonight. So Trey, do you have any updates for us?
I do. The Tri-Hydro lawsuit has been filed.
Read the entire document twice.
Lots of help just to make sure we're factually accurate, and even some punctuation help from anybody who'd like a copy. I was going to have it printed today, but it's like 130 pages. So if anyone likes it, wants a copy, I'm happy to send it to you.
I appreciate your response. I asked a question and maybe it was that range, but when they referenced Tri-Hydro, they were referenced as a foreign for-profit corporation. And I was like, I mean, if you're not from Texas, you're a foreigner. And Trey said essentially, yeah, that's what that means. If you're not registered, your primary business is registered in Texas, and technically you are foreign. Learned something new today. I just thought it was funny to be referenced as a foreign for-profit corporation, but I get it. Any questions on that item? Hearing none, I do have one question on it, Trey. So that lawsuit gets filed with the court and then they're served,
Their attorney has agreed
waive service?
to waive service. He had to double check with the client, but I anticipate he'll waive. Been negotiating with the same attorneys. Everybody knows who they are. He knew the suit was coming, so I would expect that they're not going to make us go through the
Send someone to Wyoming?
Wyoming, which is easy. And just, we had mentioned this briefly. I want to make sure that I'm fully apprising the board. We decided to include one of the engineers that was involved in the design in his individual professional capacity. See the suit, it's gonna name both Tri-Hydro Corporation and then the engineer. That suit's in the Guadalupe County District Court.
And that's agreed in the contract that we have with them. It says that any litigation would happen in our home county.
Yes and no. It depends on, there's some ambiguity as to what the contract is. If you remember, there's a 2015 contract with River City Engineers, and then there's a 2-page contract with Tri-Hydro that's pretty scant on details, but says that it's an amendment to the 20.
So the 2015 content should apply generally.
It should, but at the end of the day, the complaint of conduct occurred in Guadalupe County, so that's the appropriate.
We don't want to have to go somewhere else to do this. Any other questions on 8G before we move on? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 9, CRWA Committee and Board of Managers reports. First one is 9A, Budget Committee. Jane, you have any information for us?
I do. We met on February 8th. A couple of the topics that we were discussing were staffing in relation to the org chart, and Mr. Schwinn is going to put something together because we have a couple of items we want to talk about to the Board of Managers and get their recommendation on that. And then we are working on the schedule for the budgeting process to ensure that we have it in accordance with the contracts, the draft, and then the final versions as stated in the contracts. One more thing that we did talk about too was the Wells Ranch and Lake Dunlap blending of the rates. We kind of touched on that this last year at the end of the year to bring it forward to this current fiscal year, and it just didn't happen. There was a lot of things going on. But one of the concerns is that the Lake Dunlap and Wells Ranch participants, there's a molecule swap at times. And so some people are paying Lake Dunlap rates, but getting Wells Ranch water and vice versa. So we are looking at coming up with maybe a blended rate to kind of make that a little more equitable. That is something we'll come back after we have more discussion about that. We're going to work on meeting quarterly, if not sooner, depending on the budget time. That will play a part in it. And then one of the items that Joan had brought up, that there's a little concern over the cost of chemicals, that she gets notifications that things may be increasing. So there may be a request for a budget adjustment at some given point, but we won't know. We're just going to monitor it as we go along, and then I'll report to the board as we know more. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address those.
Question for Regina and the Budget Committee.
I've got a question. Regina, with regards to the budget committee and the org chart, I guess we're going to talk about this at maybe hopefully item D. What was the thought process to try to do an org chart when we're looking for a general manager? What was the logic for that, to try to change the org chart? Or I apologize, I couldn't make that meeting, but so what's the thought process?
The main thing is that we have an in-house engineer position out there, and Mr. Schwinn has voiced his concerns that we don't have enough operators. And so the discussion is to maybe to take that money and use it for operator positions. And so I want to see how the original org chart is set up versus what he's proposing. Just something to take the Board of Managers to look at.
I think Randy took it upon himself to restructure the organization chart.
Yeah,
Randy, correct me if I'm wrong.
I was just trying to get some background. I just, as a board member, I'm concerned that we would do that, only because we're going to get a general manager, hopefully at some point. Some of the monies that were kicked in for these positions, obviously, just speaking on behalf of County Line, for specific positions. I would rather the general manager who comes, does the org chart, determines whether we need those people or not, then make the determination. I would hate for us to make some swaps now, and then we get a general manager asking for more positions, which requires more money from all of us. So my 2 cents on that, and we'll monitor it and see where it goes. But again, I'm adamantly opposed to changing the org chart without a general manager, full-time general manager. Nothing against you, Mr. Schwinn. Just I think at some point, I do not want this county region to come to us, ask for more monies for other positions when the position's already funded. Let the new general manager make the determination how org chart should be structured, how his needs are met with staff. That's the only thing I ask.
Randy, are there some things in organizational chart that need to happen very quickly versus things that could wait for a new GM? Or could it all just wait?
The way I had looked at it, and I talked it over with Regina, is that if we get a general manager in here, say in 3-4 months, first of all, he's probably going to have to pick himself an assistant general manager somewhere along the line. And by the time all this happens, we're going to be in a new fiscal year. And right now, I don't think we need to have a project engineer. I think we need more of a project manager. And I talked this over with David, which he is doing right now. He's managing a lot of the projects himself. And so we're kind of phasing him into being more of a project manager. And he's familiar with everybody and every project. And That's kind of my idea right now, and let the new general manager, once he gets his feet on the ground, he can pick his assistant according to his needs. And that'll take us into the new fiscal year. And at that time, if he still wants a project engineer, well, that'll be his choice.
Fine. I mean, there's further discussion. I don't want to take time. I just wanted to get some background because I didn't go to the meeting. Oh, that's
Budget
fine.
and all that. And I would agree with Randy that it's not gonna be very long from now that Randy's gonna have to be putting together a preliminary budget probably by June. Timelines that are built in now to the process where we gotta have the adopted in August, so we're gonna on time pretty rapidly here. We're already burning through the second month of the year and it's only 6 months out. We have to adopt a budget. Happen quickly. 9B, Policy and Legislative Committee. Do you have an update?
Yes, sir. The admin policy is right now in final edits. Most of them are not substantive. We've ironed most of that out. We're down to cleaning up the document to make it look nice and pretty, crisp and clear. Tuition reimbursement is complete. We're holding off on presenting that to the Board of Trustees until we do the employee handbook. Hand in hand. The employee handbook, we've received back the legal comments. We're going through those. We're doubling up on meetings and trying to knock that out sooner than later. Hopefully we can have that in the April Board of Trustees meeting. Randy's asked for a new policy for the facilities access policy. Working on that.
And go ahead.
We met January 30th. One of the things we discussed is some of the timing of shutdowns on the relocation projects on IH-10 and FM 1518. We had asked UEG to make sure they're coordinating with staff and having the contractors coordinate with staff on avoiding summer shutdowns. We just don't want those transmission mains going down in the summer if they don't have to. Obviously, all of us have pretty significant demands and really don't want to lose a leg of the Mid-Cities pipeline for these projects. And they agreed that they would keep a close eye on that and work closely with staff on scheduling that. Staff did bring us up to speed with a new relocation project that's going to come soon on Loop 1604, just north of I-10. That one's going to be very difficult. There's not a lot of room for easement acquisition. Fortunately, Canyon Regional is in an easement for most of that, other than in areas where they cross a road. So it should be reimbursable, but it's going to be very difficult to find additional easement. We may end up having to go around a long way. We've got concerns. We want to make sure that Converse still has their water, and I think there's one more connection in there too that we need to make sure we can get water back to if we have to do a different alignment. But it's going to be a challenging project. I don't know if y'all been 1604 north of 10 in a while, right there in that general area, but there's a lot of growth going on and there's not a lot of room left. CRWA staff has the engineering standards and specifications from UEG. Staff indicated that they expect probably at the end of this week having comments back to UEG to finalize those. Again, those are really important documents. Canyon Regional in the past has kind of used a little bit of everything in their standards. And it'd be nice for Canyon Regional to have their own design standards. To the question we had earlier on the Hayes Caldwell transmission line, the report the construction committee got was that staff was working on the plan improvements necessary. So this pipeline that would feed Martindale, Maxwell, and County Line, depending on who's using water and when, you know, the flows could be as low as 100, 200 gallons a minute, or as high as 1,000, 1,500 gallons a minute. That obviously takes different types of pumps and equipment to make sure that the pipeline's pressurized properly. And so staff's been working with Ardura and on their own to see what needs to be improved. One of the concerns is we don't want to do the improvements in the phase 1 improvements, or I'm sorry, the phase 2 of the Hayes Caldwell improvements, do this work and then come in and tear it out for a transmission line in the future. That doesn't make a ton of sense. So David's been working with Ardura to kind of look at some of that stuff and what we may need to revise a little bit on the improvement side. We did meet with all the entities to discuss, for one, county lines delivery point, because that was a very important part of the conversation, and to look at different options for alignments. Do you have anything else on the pipeline, David? No. We'd already heard about the discussion of potentially doing it at the construction committee was going to be loaded into a SWIFT fund. And I heard afterwards, I don't know if you emailed me or who documents, but I think there was discussion about it now being in the D fund instead of SWIFT funding. So the funding opportunities are being looked at for the pipeline. So Flora Meadows was another topic for us. Flora Meadows is a subdivision in East Central's district. There's a Canyon Regional line that has to be relocated. You might remember we approved an easement here, or we approved the general manager signing an easement a couple months ago on that. There have been a lot of challenges with this project. There continue to be challenges. Different entities, there's about 4 different easements there, and Canyon Regional is the furthest in. So anyone who changes one on the closer to the road, it pushes Canyon Regional further in. And we just found out here in the last week that CPS needs an additional 8 feet that's pushing Canyon Regional further in. So that project, the relocation itself hasn't started yet, but I would expect that to be starting here in a couple of weeks. Again, that's another sensitive one where we don't want to have shutdowns happening in the middle of summer. Alliance, there looks to be a little bit of issue with receiving water here from the Alliance pipeline. Staff is planning on meeting with Alliance to see how we're going to operate that water coming into this facility. But one of the challenges is if water's coming in from Alliance, we can't also put Lake Dunlap water in as well at the same time, and that's going to obviously be a major problem. So they're going to have to look at what needs to be done to fix that challenge. Garver is going to begin evaluating the filters here at Lake Dunlap, the ceramic nanostone filters. I believe they had a turnaround, Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, 30 days. 39 days to look at that and see what we're going to need to get that plant operating at full capacity. On the Wells Ranch 2 generators, the construction committee held an extra meeting this month to evaluate the electrical design engineers. We had Garver, M&S, and Ardura. After ranking them and averaging those rankings, Ardura came out ahead. They were actually very close. All 3 ended up pretty close to each other. One of the comments at the construction committee that I thought was a good comment is making sure that we're not overburdening one firm. UA is the project manager on this, but all of the staff working on this are in a completely different division. So although Ardura is working on membrane and Hayes Caldwell improvements, this is a different division working on the electrical design for the Wells Ranch 2 generators. So we'll make that recommendation later on in the meeting. On Hayes Caldwell Phase 1, Ardura did evaluate the bids for Phase 1 of the Hayes Caldwell Water Treatment Plant. Those bids include tank and some piping and electrical work. Two bidders, we heard this earlier in this meeting, with preload and then DN tanks. Ardura provided a recommendation to staff to award the bid to DN tanks. Staff worked with Ardura on the different criteria for that recommendation, and the committee is going to recommend that bid be awarded to DN tanks. Staff's working on the Gonzales Underground Water Conservation District on the 920 acre feet, which I think we'll hear about more later. That's all I have. Sorry for the long report.
Questions on the report from? We're going to move item F up, 9F, Board of Managers report.
Yeah, the Board of Managers met on February 7th. We welcomed 2 new members to the board, Mr. Sherman from Green Valley, and Regina's back on the board from Crystal Clear. We also did have 2 items up for recommendation from the group. One was the electrical engineering services for Wells Ranch generator project, and we did concur with the staff's recommendation and the construction committee's recommendation for proceed with Ardura, and we'll make that recommendation later. We also, Ardura proposed or recommended to the Board of Managers to proceed with DN tanks on the Hayes Caldwell nuclear well over there, and we were not privy to any of their scoring criteria. It wasn't provided to us, but based off of their recommendation and staff, we concurred with that as well, and we'll follow with that recommendation later in the meeting. We received the same updates you guys have in your packets regarding UEG's work on the encasement on Santa Clara and Zool transmission line projects down there, down south, the asset management, GIS, and design standards and specs. Our biggest conversation that we had at the Board of Managers was on drought contingency plans, and bounced ideas back and forth on how to make those better, while also you realizing that each one is unique and they all can't follow the same path. Abigail Mayberry, she's not here tonight, but she had lots of great ideas. Regina did as well. That's all I got.
Justin, thank you very much. Couple things around.
General manager search, you.
9D, general manager search. We have been working with Todd Bottler, and Mr. Bottler recently provided us with a list of some potential interviewees for the general manager. 3 were provided, and haven't moved forward with that yet. We're gonna have a subcommittee meeting or a committee meeting after this meeting here, just spend a few minutes going over those, and then we're gonna look at an agenda to start doing interviews. That group. So I can tell you that the 3 that were presented, which are not currently out in the public domain at this point in time, because they're all employed, they are very strong candidates, extraordinarily strong candidates, and I think that any one of the 3 would be excellent general manager here. Strong water and wastewater backgrounds in this area, long serving in their positions. I would think that you would find that any one of the 3 would be. We'll be looking at that, and then we'll be making a recommendation after we do some interviews, and we'll probably have another, once an interview thing has been established, we'll determine a path forward from there. Any questions on that? First, I gotta tell you, Mr. Butler is very thorough.
I'm surprised you didn't know who he was.
Sorry?
Surprised you didn't know who he was. Know Mr. Butler before this?
Actually, I did. I figured out I did know Mr. Butler before. I actually met him here, and he gave a presentation one time, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I've been on the phone with him frequently now, but there was a question somewhere.
Salary range.
Mr. Butler did bring up that our salary range, which we had presented, which topped out at 190,000, might be slightly light for what we're looking at. And we may have to come back to the Board of Trustees to make a minor adjustment to that, but we may be only off by 10 or 15,000. Not like it's a big swing at this, but told me that given how tight that market is for highly experienced general managers in this range, that he said right now, that market has gotten very, very tight, and those salaries are going up rapidly. So if we're gonna hire somebody good, we're probably gonna have to wind up paying for somebody good. Questions on that before we move on to the next one?
Reorganize, save that money. Don't reorganize, save that money for the general manager.
Moving on to 9E, update on CRWA General Counsel Selection Committee. Mr. Ellis,
No update, sir. We've had scheduling issues with some of the committee members, so we've actually not had an opportunity to meet. We will meet next week with or without everybody. We'll have some for you in March.
I'll tell you, time is of the essence. We really need to get that one taken care of, which you already know.
Sir, and I need to talk to you after the meeting. I will not be at the March meeting.
Okay.
So I'll have to either give up the chair or write a letter or however you want to handle it.
That is not as complex as it sounds. You can just
But
provide a
we-
written report.
Have a day set.
No, ma'am. We'll be in touch with you tomorrow.
Any questions on 9E? Okay, great. We're gonna move on to 10, general business. First one here. CRWA 2402-011 concerning appointing a CRWA representative to the Alliance Regional Water Authority Board of Directors. As noted prior, Mr. Pat Allen served on the CRWA appointed Board of Directors for ARWA. And with his resignation from Green Valley, it leaves it spot open. Valley Board has taken a vote and asked that Nick Sherman be considered for that position. But to do this correctly, we have to open it up to the board. So I'll take any recommendations from the Board of Trustees at this point in time for a new member onto the ARWA Board of Directors.
I move that Nick Sherman be appointed to the Alliance Regional Water Authority Board.
I'll second.
Hold on, before you move or make a motion, why don't you open the floor for nominations? And then once you've closed the nominations, then a motion would be appropriate.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Do I have any nominations for a member to the Board of Directors for ARWA?
I nominate Nick Sherman.
Do I have a second nomination?
I'll second.
Multiple seconds, that's good. Do I have any other nominations? I believe I have to ask for multiple nominations and then vote from
You
there.
have to at least ask if anybody.
Are there any other nominations for this position?
Motion to close nominations?
Thank you, sir. I have a second.
Brandon Rohan, second. Got my name there for a second.
Okay, now you're ready for a motion.
Now I'm ready for a motion.
Brandon Rohan move for Nick Sherman to be appointed to Alliance Regional Water Authorities Board.
I have a second and I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Sherman. You now have another job.
Thank you. Ma'am.
10B, CRWA 2402-012, concerning approving the entry of a master engineering service agreement with Garber. Board will discuss, consider and act on this resolution approving entry of a master engineering service agreement with Garber.
So moved. Ramos.
I have a motion to approve 2402-012. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion before we move forward with the vote?
I have a question. My understanding was there was some, I don't want to say negotiations, but there was some discussion with Garber as to why this is taking longer than it should have with the previous general manager. So what was those issues that we resolved?
Sure. We supplied Garver with our standard promulgated form of master engineering services. Mr. Swoboda, who's here tonight as Garver's representative, and his team went over our agreement with a fine tooth comb. They have a very diligent in-house lawyer. Requested a couple of what we considered relatively minor changes to for negotiations with the general manager. We resolved those. There was a request to limit the liability of Garver to the amount of insurance coverage that required some additional consideration and discussion among the. End of the day, it was my recommendation that we didn't make that accommodation, and the executive committee and the general manager concurred with that. We presented that back to Garver. They understood that we were going to leave that particular provision in place as originally drafted. Once we got past that, what appeared might have been an impasse, we were prepared to move forward with the agreement. Changes you're going to see are going to reflect things like whether or not reliance upon an electronic document versus a paper document. We have what's actually ended up being the most controversial provision in the entire is what we call the most favored nation status. So when I wrote this document a couple of years ago, I put in a provision saying that whatever engineering firm we work with is going to give Canyon Regional the same or better terms as it gives to another governmental entity. That's surprisingly been somewhat controversial, or at least received feedback, because several of the consultants operate in different states. And believe it or not, Texas appears to have higher but engineers are paid in other states. So it's been a common question to ask to make that Texas specific. Made that accommodation to other engineers, so we made that accommodation here. And then the rest were, like I said, the document is actually better. Their counsel is very diligent, so I had a couple of you would appreciate this, Ms. Stubing. Missed commas and capitalizations in the form that nobody. But we have a document that we're proud of, and we held the line on not changing the liability provisions of the document.
The only comment I'd like to make is, this goes back to Ms. Steuben. If we could have had the agreement attached to here, it would have helped us look at what we were entering into. So that's the only comment I'm gonna make, but I'm fine with what you stated.
Noted?
The staff, did you catch the note from Mr. Ramos?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on this before we ask for a motion?
What is the limit of liability in the contract? Does anybody know that off?
There is no limit of liability in the contract. We've learned a very painful lesson through the trihydro experiment that has convinced us that there should not be a liability limitation. So I don't blame Garver or anybody else for asking to limit. First request is always to the amount of fees that you've paid us. My answer to that is always absolutely positively not. Second request that was made here is also fairly standard, which is, well, can we limit it to the amounts of. That one actually bore some consideration because, as you're going to see with service order number 1, not all projects are created equal. Some of them, the insurance requirement from our engineering agreement. Others, it might not be enough. So we actually gave some consideration to that. Decided that it was in CRWA's best interest not to have a cap on life. There's other statutory caps and other provisions of law that might come into play under certain circumstances. Documents themselves will not contain a cap on damages.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions before we vote? Hearing none, all those in favor of CRWA 2402-012, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? 10B passes unanimously. 10C, CRWA 2402-013, concerning approval of a service order number 1 with Garver Engineering. Board will discuss, consider, and act on resolution 2402-013, approving service order number 1 with Garver pertaining to evaluation of the performance of the ceramic membrane filtration system at Lake Dunlap Water Treatment Plant at a cost not to exceed $20,000.
So moved.
I have a motion. And I have a second. Any discussion before we take a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, item C passes unanimously. Item D, CRWA 2402-014, concerning entering into a certain agreement with the Gonzales County Underground Water Conservation District. The board will discuss, consider, and act on this resolution, directing CRWA's interim general manager and water council to enter into certain agreements relating to mitigation, monitoring, and production phasing with the Gonzales County Underground Water Conservation District as reasonably necessary to secure approval of CRWA's pending application for permits from the district. Any such agreement shall be strictly subject to ratification by the CRWA Board of Trustees at its next meeting thereafter. I'm going to turn this one over to Randy for a briefing on this before we take any action.
There was, at the last Gonzales meeting, there was I'm going to say a large misunderstanding about how much water we were actually asking for. And they had thought it was for 14,000 acre feet, which all we're asking for is to amend the permit right now for 920 acre feet. And I talked to 2 of the directors today, and they, after I got through explaining what they had misinterpreted, they were in compliance, and they said there shouldn't be any problem with it at all. That there was a total misunderstanding on the number of acre feet. And so we should be getting our permit if the rest of the directors go along with him. But that's the story right now. They were worried about over pumping, extra well locations, and it just got out of hand. But now that I talked to him and that, it looks like we should be getting the permit without any problem, hopefully.
When is their next meeting?
Tomorrow night. Oh, you bet.
I appreciate the fact you were able to clear up the misunderstanding. There's a pretty big difference between 992 acre feet and 14,000 acre feet.
What attributed to the misunderstanding? I mean, clearly, what attributed to the misunderstanding? That's a big misunderstanding. What attributed to the misunderstanding? What attributed? How did they have a misunderstanding? Because my understanding, the application was 920. You know, the public hearing, the public meeting was 920. How is it they go from 920 to 14,000?
There was a big misunderstanding between the old general manager and what was actually at the permit request.
Mr. Ramos, I very much share your concern about this. Not only did we file an application that clearly asks for 920 acre feet, we submitted modeling and all sorts of supporting documentation. And in fact, you may have been there. There was a workshop that was hosted by CRWA to give a presentation to Groundwater Districts Board and to the members of the public about the application. There was a contested proceeding filed that went through an administrative law judge, and a determination was made over an application that clearly said on the top of it. You know, it's no secret that our intention is to follow that up with a much larger request in the future, but apparently some way, somehow, there was some confusion till today that the Groundwater District Board members thought that this was. And I'm also concerned about how they could have been that confused, because but just so we give you a little idea of what the appetite is for requests from Canyon Regional. Those components are mitigation, they want more, monitoring, they want more, and they want phasing in of the water. In other words, whatever amount we receive under the new permit, they don't want it to all come online at once. That's understandable if you're talking about 12,000 acre feet. We were a little bewildered when they wanted us to phase in 920 acre feet. But this has been a huge disconnect that lawyers have been involved with. There's a series of communication from the Groundwater District's attorney to our water council. I'm not handling this, Ms. Carls is, but she's got multiple items of correspondence from their attorney talking about those three items. And it seems that a simple phone call from our interim general manager today might have waved a magic wand and made some of those requirements go away. But we know they're coming in connection with the big ask.
Asking for action?
Yeah, basically, this is, board will consider, discuss, and act on resolution 24/0/12/14, directing our interim council enter in certain agreements. So yes, sir, I am asking for action. I have a motion to move and a second. Any further discussion before we vote? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. Hearing none, and Randy, again, I told you this before the meeting started, I really appreciate the fact that you were able to have a kind of a conversation there to kind of sort this out, because it's perplexing how we went from 992 to 14,000 back to 992 and
920.
920. I just,
It confused. I'm confused anymore.
and then wanting all kinds of monitoring wells for 920 acre feet seemed like an awful big outreach there for what we were asking for, but now I understand what the problem was. All right, moving on to 10E, CRWA 2402-015, concerning an award to Ardora Engineering for a contract to provide electrical engineering services for Wells Ranch 2 generator project. The board will discuss, consider, and act on this resolution declaring Ardora Engineering as the successful candidate to provide electrical engineering services for the Wells Ranch Phase 2 generator project and directing the interim general manager to negotiate terms of a contract and/or service order, providing the terms, scope, and cost of such work.
And so the construction committee met and ranked Ardura, M&S, and Garver, and we are making a recommendation that we move forward with Ardura. Same with the board of managers we heard from Justin, so I'll make that in the form of a motion.
I have a motion on this one. Do I have a second? I have a second for Mr. Gilbert. Any other further discussion on this item before we vote?
Yes, sir. The general manager will bring this back to us as a, work order once we have
Yes, it'll be approved. Yes, he'll negotiate that and it'll come back to us as for ratification as required.
I really think this step on both items E and F is a bit of an abundance of caution. What we're doing is having the board really ratify the decision that that's not a contract we'll vote for today, but it is a contract. We'll need to come back to the board. That's why they're not, that's why these two items are not attached. There's no.
Any other comments, questions before we vote? Yes, ma'am.
So, does the construction committee like have a scoring thing?
We do.
Can we at least see that in our packet so that we can see, you know,
Can we include that?
why?
If that's,
I'm sorry?
it can be included if so requested.
Yes, please, for future reference whenever we're doing this. If we can have the scoring sheets, because I was gonna mention this in a later item, but just having the resolution sheets and even the online packet, you know, I understand this saves paper, but if it's on the online packet and we choose to print it, that's our choice. And to read through all the, because we have no backup here in any of the items. So if we can at least get the scoring sheets from that for the future.
Yeah, so when we did this process, I compiled all the sheets, compiled the averages, compiled the RFQ, and put it together in a bundle about this thick and handed it over to Hannah. So CRWA staff has it now, but we can get you at least a summary sheet of the, because I had it for every single individual category, how they were ranked, how they were averaged, so.
Yeah, something, you know, for us to see how and why
Maybe
you
just a
guys,
scoring matrix so you can.
Yeah,
see the score.
exactly,
You
yeah.
might not want all the documents, but a scoring matrix.
at least the scoring matrix, yeah. Okay,
Clarification, sir. Item or F?
Well, they wouldn't have gotten it for, did y'all get it for E? Justin, did y'all have my, because the construction committee had the scoring matrix. Okay,
So neither of these two items, E or F, went to the,
It went to there with a committee recommendation from the construction committee that had been completed.
you got the scoring on E. That was because you had it?
Right, because he serves on that
Oh.
committee.
He saw it. Board of Managers saw it, excuse me. Did the Board of Managers see the
yes.
but it wasn't provided?
yeah, the board of managers used to take the recommendations from the construction committee. And then what happened was the construction committee started meeting after the board of managers. So the board of managers were not involved at all. The board of managers ended up being a meeting to discuss what we discussed here later. The purpose of the board of managers was to have some of these discussions beforehand to provide to their individual trustee members. That had gotten kind of lost, and I couldn't tell you when it got lost, but it got lost a number of years ago. We've tried to revamp that. Now the construction committee meets before the board of managers provides them. So I think what Justin's trying to say is he's still trying to work some of those kinks out.
I think they should have,
Absolutely correct.
Yes.
And I think it's important to reiterate here that neither one of those committees have any sort of decision-making authority. They have recommendation authority that is not binding on this board. You can vote contrary to what they both recommended if you want. The decision is made in this room tonight at this public meeting. You know, notwithstanding the fact that that process could obviously do some
But it
improvement.
gives them more information on which to make a recommendation.
Absolutely.
Which I want them to have everything they need to make that recommendation. So if that's gonna be moved into this, fine.
Any additional discussion on 10E? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, passed unanimously. 10F, CRWA 2402016, concerning an award to DN Tanks for a contract to provide construction services for the Hayes Caldwell Water Treatment Plant Project. Board will discuss, consider, and act on this resolution declaring DN Tanks as a successful bidder to provide tank construction services for the Hayes Caldwell Water Treatment Plant Project and directing the interim general manager to negotiate terms of a contract and/or service order, providing terms, scope, and costs of such work. And again, that would be brought back to the board for ratification.
No, brought back to the board for approval.
Approval. I'm sorry.
Again, the board can vote yes or no once you've got the contract in your packet.
Yep. I have a request taken as executive session. Do I need a second on that, Trey, or can we just,
I can second that. Brandon Rohan?
I have a motion and a second to take this into executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It is now 7:29. We'll move into executive session.
Are we gonna move into executive session several times or once and address all items?
No, we're gonna move into this one, then come back out, and then we can't take them multiples in there. Structured the way this is structured. You can't take one item in.
Item 11 says the Board of Trustees may meet in a closed session, discuss any item above pursuant to Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Poor.
Do you want to go ahead and put?
Yeah.
Well,
move them all
I
in?
don't want to go in and out.
My recommendation is that you flag the items that you're going to take into executive session and let's just move all of them under item 11A and take them all up at once.
Thank you for playing.
All right, so how do we handle this? Does anybody want to take any of the other remaining two items into executive session? Item G or H? Hearing no or no comments. We will then at 7:30 move on to item 11, executive session. Board of Trustees may meet in a closed
So
session.
are we going to come back to G and H? Or are we going to do G and H and then go into executive session?
It's whatever you prefer. My recommendation is let's do G and H because we got a lot of people here. They
Yes.
recognize we're not going to
The
come.
back
out of
and forth,
executive.
I'd like to be in bed tonight.
Duly noted. Item F is going to be moved into executive session under item 11. 10G, CRWA 2402017, concerning the recusal of the CRWA treasurer. The board will consider, discuss, and act concerning resolution 2402017, concerning temporary recusal of the sitting treasurer and voting board of trustees until such a time as issues are resolved. And this was placed on the agenda by Ms. Stubing. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Stubing.
I feel like we would not be having this discussion tonight, but crystal clear is action affecting the water supply of the Hayes Caldwell plant. Crystal clear, Ms. Frankie's interests do not and cannot align with Canyon Regionals as long as the lawsuit is pending. Section 04 of the bylaws provide that it shall be the duty of the treasurer as chair of the budget committee or designee to see that rates for potable water delivered to master meters are based on the actual production cost of providing that product and service, including overhead and capital costs. It should be the duty of the treasurer to assess any special fees authorized by the Board of Trustees, to pay the bills for the authority, to collect all monies owed, to account for all monies collected and expended in behalf of the authority, to call for an annual audit of the authority's financial records, and to perform other financial duties of the authority. I feel like we cannot have a treasurer in place whose district is in active litigation that implicates not just, well, I thought the Hayes Caldwell, now we find out something else is different tonight, other than Canyon Regional Authority itself. Ms. Frankie has zero incentive to see that the rates of potable water are based on the actual production cost, when her district is deriving a financial benefit for her failure to implement rates that reflect the actual production cost of the Hayes Caldwell plant. She has clearly chosen to allow the status quo to the financial detriment of County Line, Martindale, and Maxwell. Accordingly, I move that she step down from her position until all the litigation is squared away and our demand letter is addressed, and see where we go from there. I just find it, they're paying 13 or 14 cents per thousand for water. That's unheard of. She has been our treasurer for how long now? It should be the treasurer's duties to see that all production costs are collected and everything else, and the cost of the water made accordingly. Right. And to me, she has a big conflict because of what before this, before our bylaws were amended, it was the treasurer's sole duty to set the rates for the water. And then when we revised the bylaws, we changed that. But I can't, who come up with this 13 or 14 cents? I have yet to get a clear answer.
It's in the contract, isn't it?
No,
No?
No.
it's actually historical and it's been there for, my understanding is, looking at staff, I think it's been in place for more than 15 or 20 years. So it would not have been enacted recently, and I believe it's been out there for an extended period of time. Anybody know differently?
So I can't believe that nobody looked at this and said, oh my goodness, this is not right. Where has the treasurer been? You're supposed to be overseeing everything, and I'm just flabbergasted and disgusted with the whole situation.
I don't believe there's a provision in our bylaw.
There's a provision in the bylaws that allows the removal of officers. The way the item that was submitted, not synonymous with removal. So recusal to me suggests on a kind of a case by case. But certainly we have the latitude to consider this as a request for removal. I think that it bears at least discussion. I don't think it's outright barred by the bylaws, but the guidance that we have is limited to section 3.
Does recusal not fall with the individual and own ethical standards on whether or not they have a conflict?
Right, so the standard for recusal is individual has an opportunity first to recuse them. If they decline to recuse them, as established by the collective, then they can be forcibly recused. A whole lot of that happening in Congress, calling it impeachment, but it would be a similar type of action. Typically, on a recusal, we see a specific where there's a potential conflict of interest on a specific item as opposed to. But I want to make sure that we understand the specific request from Ms. Dubing. I don't want to cut her off at the knees. Or grouping of items that recusal might be appropriate. Obviously, we need to hear from the treasurer and it's important to understand, and I'll tell you right off that I don't completely understand it. Rate making procedure for these contracts. The 13 cents that Ms. Dubing is upset about, we've all been for 2 years now.
More than that.
At least 2 years, and I've tried to ascertain where did the 13 cents come from. She's talking about what's the de facto overage charge under the Hayes Caldwell contract. When a party produces more than their allocated share under the contract, they're charged a fee plus additional actual costs. And that fee is 13 cents. thousand. Not in the contract. There's no reference to it whatsoever. It's just a historical fee that's been implemented by CRWA. The two people that I know who have been affiliated with CRWA the longest are Mr. Rosenberg, been around since 1989 or 90, and Mr. Davenport. And I've asked both of them what the origin of the fee was, and neither one of them knew for sure. It's just kind of historically always been that way. I've heard an allusion to it might have been taken from one of the other agreements, like Dunlap contract perhaps, but nobody seems to know. So one of the things that Ms. Stubing's understandably upset about is, well, why is 13 cents the fee? Question that you have to consider as a board when that in relation to this action item is, what is the role of the treasurer in establishing that rate or any other rate? That's an important consideration. Joan may be able to speak on this with some. Obviously, the budget has some impact on the rates, but there's also a budget-making process that involves approval by the entire board, and it also involves annual approval by an auditor, an independent auditor. So those are some of the considerations that you need to take.
That 14 cents applies to the entire.
Rate. The rate is, when the rate becomes applicable, rate for all parties. So not all parties have found themselves in the situation where the rate, would be implemented, but if and when they do, right, it's not a crystal.
Clear, it's applicable to anybody in that situation.
Yes, sir, it's not a crystal clear specific rate.
Off topic here, so I'll move.
That a reflection on where there's 13 or
Would it not be fair to say that whatever funds they paid for the water that they used would have been at the current operating, the O&M and all the other rates, plus the 13 cents would have gone back into the budget for that, for the Hayes Caldwell? So would it have not gone back to benefit the users of that group by reducing the cost?
that would be where the water came from.
Joan, how do you apply the 13 cents that's collected?
A bunch. Nugent's.
Joan, do you know the origin of the 13?
Have we had other entities go over in other areas?
I have to agree with Humberto. I think we are getting,
We're getting off a task. I
Yeah.
mean, Robert's Rules of Order calls for a motion in a second to have discussion. We ran into discussion right away. I mean, let's stick with the task. So I'll move forward Resolution 24-02-017. My motion.
Can you be specific of what you're moving?
Well, I'm moving for this item here.
Well, that item is incomplete. It's a
Right.
blank,
It's
it's a blank
It's
resolution.
either long or too vague.
Well, then whoever put this item here, whoever was instructed to put this item here should have, made this a little bit more clear. But if there is an item here that has a resolution, I mean, now you're asking me to add stuff in here, but I do not know what we're gonna, I'm taking I'm taking something that's written in front of me that should have been complete.
I think it's important to note that we worked with Ms. Stubing on Thursday and Friday trying to get that information, and it was not forthcoming, and the time ran out where a packet has to be sent out.
So
And
it
she
doesn't,
insisted
it
it
doesn't,
be on
this
the
item
agenda.
does not say what y'all are asking for. It has to be clear. This item says CRWA 24-02-017 concerning recusal of CRWA treasurer.
And there is
That's
no
what it says.
language in that unit.
Well,
correct?
the resolution itself, if that's what you're
So what
referring
are we
to, Mr.
asking?
Cruz, the resolution can be filled in, it can be completed. There's clearly an item on the agenda that supports action. It doesn't matter whether or not we have a pre-filled out resolution for 30 years, we didn't ever do that. Mr. Kaufman made that change with strong urging. So we're not bound by the fact that the resolution in your packet is blank. We're bound by the agenda item on the agenda, and I believe that the agenda item is sufficient for action. We can go back and fill in the resolution itself based upon what you do tonight.
But I don't understand the recusal. Recusal from what?
From serving as
From our
treasurer.
duties.
It says temporary. Where's the definition of temporary? 2 seconds? 5
Yeah,
minutes?
till the-
A week?
Yeah, I didn't mean to stomp on your motion, Humberto. I just
me
wanted to know what are we going to vote on with your motion? That's all. Well,
I
how
would also
long?
like you to refer to the demand letter that we gave CRWA to in Crystal Clear.
And to Umberto's point, that's not in item G. We're talking and adding words to what's in front of us. And if we can add those words, why can't we add conversation about 13 cents?
So
But can
to
Tracy
Mr.
go,
Ramos, to
please?
Mr. Ramos's point, there's got to be a motion and then a second, and then you can have the discussion. He was just trying to keep us corralled in.
Okay.
He's right.
All right.
Sheila, you have a question?
Yes, and this is for Ms. Frankie. Would you be willing to recuse yourself? Let's just put that out there. And that way we can know where we go from there.
I would say when I believe there's a conflict of interest, I would then be okay with recusing myself. I do not believe there's a conflict of interest.
Right, thank you. So now we know.
Well, I need a second so we can have further discussion. I have a motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item?
Yes, sir. Are other officers going to recuse themselves whenever they're conflicted? I mean, I could probably point out a situation in the last few months where another officer refused to recuse herself when her actions seemed very conflicted in light of the ongoing Hayes-Caldwell conflict.
I concur.
Any other comments or questions? We're gonna try and keep this moving forward, following Robert's Rules of Order at this point in time.
Sorry, Humberto, I didn't mean to
Yep.
mess this up.
So I have a question. I don't see it in this item G.
I was gonna ask for clarification on exactly what our motion is as well.
May I go back to temporary recusal until issues are resolved? Those are vague. There's nothing specific in there, and she does not feel conflicted. I'm confused. Really, really am confused with exactly what we're asking here.
Well, that'll probably show up in the vote as far as I'm saying, because we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
I would like for her to recuse herself until this litigation here by the Ball Ranch and the Hayes Caldwell thing is completed.
I think the litigation that we talked about earlier has absolutely nothing to do with us. We're just a witness and we're preparing documents. I don't think that that has anything to do with this. That's my humble opinion.
Part of the alliance.
From every issue, from just Hayes Caldwell issues, what's, I guess, the definition of what if, just everything?
And when it comes down to the letter of August 31st, isn't staff working that out and trying to figure out where we're at, and attorneys working on that?
The answer to that question is yes, but
But
that's not part of this.
That's not the demand letter that you're talking
No,
about.
sir, I believe in, let me.
You're talking about this demand letter. My apologies. You used the word demand letter and we've talked about several demand letters tonight.
So my understanding of the motion and, or of your request, and we'll see if Mr. Ramos wants to clarify his motion or not, or amend his motion. So my understanding, Ms. Dubing, of your request is that the board should vote on whether to recuse the current treasurer until such time as the BAW litigation is concluded and the dispute concerning rates on the Hayes Caldwell contract is concluded.
Our demand letter.
February 9.
Until the issues raised in today's demand letter concerning the overage issue is resolved.
Right.
So that's.
I'll gladly amend my
Is that okay with you, Roberto?
time with me.
All right, is there any further discussion on this so we can keep kind of,
You need a second on the amended motion, so we're
Make a
very clear.
second on his amended motion.
motion in a second? Is there any further discussion before we take a vote?
Take the motion.
Sure. There's a motion to recuse the treasurer until such time as the federal litigation initiated by the BAW Ranch against Crystal Clear Special Utility District has been resolved, and such time as the dispute concerning the Hayes Caldwell regional water supply contract as restated in 2021 has been resolved. And the issues to be framed in that dispute are as contained in the February 9th, 2024 letter directed to CRWA and Crystal Clear by the presidents of Maxwell, County Line, and Martindale. Is that correct, Mr. Ramos?
All right, so we have a motion that's been read out. We've,
I got another question. That suit, that federal suit, do you think it is or is not applicable to?
My question, the question to me
My
is,
question for you is that suit, that federal suit, applicable to Hayes Caldwell or not?
federal suit specifically references the Hayes Caldwell project and the agreement. But I believe that the issues in the suit and the relief being sought by the plaintiff do not directly implicate either the contract or Canyon Regional.
Page 7 of
Because it was
the
moved.
lawsuit.
Didn't make the motion, sir.
because it's in the motion.
Comment is that it shouldn't be.
Nope, it's in the motion, so we have a motion and a second. We've had
I concur.
a lot of discussion, so here's what we're gonna
Question,
do.
please.
We're going to do that, excuse me, we're gonna do that right now with a roll call vote. So we're gonna start with Mr. Ellis. Mr. Ellis, how do you vote?
Nay.
Mr. Gibbs?
Nay.
Mr. Fonville?
Aye.
Mr.
Nay.
Hoare? Aye.
No.
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 No. I don't, did you keep the count on that, Hannah? Is it 10-6 or 9-6? Okay.
That's a similar number to something I've heard before.
Okay. We've dealt with that one. 10H. CRWA 23-11-078. And should that be 18 instead of 078, Hannah?
No, 2311
Oh, yep,
078.
I apologize. We're
4 months ago, we acted on this last month and it was shot down by a vote of 9-6. I'm curious as to why it's back on here if we've already made a decision on this resolution. And when I talked to our attorney earlier, he told me we have the right to waive Robert's Rules of Order, but it seems that everything prior to right now, we haven't wanted to waive Robert's Rules of Order.
So the bylaws also speak to that. The bylaws of CRWA, as adopted in October 2023, Article 7 relates to quorum and rules. And Section 7.03 reads as follows. The latest edition of Robert's Rules of Order shall govern the parliamentary procedure of all the meetings of the authority, unless the board shall provide to the contrary. That appears to give the board pretty wide latitude to deviate from Robert's Rules of Order and suspend Robert's Rules of Order. There appears to be a conflict in that any trustee has the ability to put any item on the agenda. And so this item has been placed on the agenda at the specific request of a trustee. That ambiguity in our section 7.03 probably doesn't expressly prohibit us from considering this item again. If we do follow Robert's Rules of Order, it would be considered a motion for reconsideration with several stringent requirements. Up to the board as to how to proceed. You're not in legal jeopardy either way, as far as I'm concerned. But
We're just in an area where I need a little guidance. Do we need to take action to suspend Robert's Rules of Order?
that would be appropriate. Because the term, unless the board shall provide to the contrary, is of course not defined in the bylaws.
Okay, so do I have a motion to suspend Robert Rules of Order in reference to this specific item, item 10H? Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. I guess I better do this with a roll call so we get a count real
Yes.
accurate.
Mr. Booth.
Yes, sir.
What would be the purpose of suspending Robert's Rules of Orders?
To allow us to reconsider a vote that was just taken last month. This resolution's already been defeated. To bring it back, the best way to do this is if we suspend Robert's Rules of Order, then we can bring it back without any gray cloud hanging over top of it, I guess. Make it simple.
So it's important to understand in the context of this item that one of the changed circumstances is the demand letter. I've just been reminded of that. The demand letter that we received today that was out here on the table, talked about just a moment ago, is one of the changed circumstances that the moving party believes is appropriate. Making your decision as to whether or not to suspend the rules and consider this. Copy was placed out there.
Letter was received today.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second, correct? Had discussions. Any other discussion on this? So the motions to suspend Robert's Rules of Order specifically on item 10H and 10H only, not suspending them indefinitely, so I want to be very clear. We can take a roll call vote. Mr. Ellis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. What's the count? It passes. Well, I vote aye. It doesn't matter. No matter what I vote, it's gonna pass either way, so.
So the requirements of Robert's Rules of Order for reconsideration and all of the stringent hurdles for that are inapplicable. At this point, we can reconsider.
Okay, so that brings us back to 10H without any challenges involved. CRWA 2311-078. Concerning an annual overage charge procedure, the board will consider, discuss, and act concerning resolution 2311-078, adopting an annual overage charge procedure developed by New Gen Strategies and Solutions LLC to be applied when the contractual annual allocation of treated water is exceeded by a participating member of the amended and restated Regional Hayes-Caldwell Counties Area Water Supply and Treatment Contract dated February 9, 2021.
Am I correct that we took this item into executive session last time?
Yes.
I would like us to do that again then, since we're going to put it back on the table. Same reason. There's questions we're gonna have of the attorney that I think we need to reiterate what was discussed last time. We need to talk about this thing that's just been put in front of us at the last minute.
I prefer just do it now.
Want,
A second for executive.
you want, does it need to be in the form of a motion?
So you have a motion and a second already. and you should-
But we have a motion and a second to move this into executive session. Roll call vote. Mr. Ellis?
Yes.
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 Sorry. Going too fast.
All right, let's start over again so we get this. Mr. Ellis?
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs?
Nay.
Fonville?
That's correct.
Aye.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
What's the count? I hope not.
Your call, brother.
Cool.
I know I do. That's why I asked the question.
Boss, make the call.
Yeah, I know. We're moving it into executive session. Doesn't hurt anything by doing that. Right? It doesn't hurt anything.
It's gonna be home by.
Going to be the same result coming back out, so. All right, it is now
You want to go to the bathroom?
7:59 PM.
For like 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. We're going to take a 6-minute break. We're going to reconvene at 5 minutes after 8 o'clock in executive session. It is now 9:37. Now we're going with that clock. 9:37 PM, we're coming out of executive session, which takes us back to item 10F, CRWA 2402-016, concerning an award to DN Tanks for a contract to provide contract for construction services for the Hayes Caldwell Water Treatment Plant project. Do I have a motion? Second call, do I have a motion? Hearing none, that item dies for lack of a motion. Moving on to item 10H, CRWA 2311-078, concerning an annual overage charge procedure. The board will consider, discuss, and act concerning resolution adopting an annual overage charge procedure developed by New Gen Strategies and Solutions LLC to be applied when the contractual annual allocation of treated water is exceeded by a participating member of the amended and restated regional water supply and treatment contract dated February 9, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Ramos and a second from Ms. Stubing. Any further discussion on this before we take a vote? Hearing none, we're going to take a roll call vote. Ann, are you ready?
Yep.
So to clarify the motion, what are we?
Adopting the new gen strategy? Yes, sir. Mr. Ellis?
Nay.
Mr. Gibbs?
Nay.
Mr. Fondo?
Yay.
Mr. Ford?
Nay.
Mr. Ramos?
Yay.
That's a yay. Ms. Shield?
Yay.
Mr. Gilbert?
Yay.
Yay.
Yes.
Mr. Bosworth?
No.
Ms. Frankie?
No.
Mr. Sherman?
No.
I'm getting tired, I'm sorry. Mabel One?
Yes.
Ms. Stubing?
Yes.
What's the score? Sounds like 8-6.
8-6.
Motion carries. You're adopting new gen strategies based on current actions tonight.
Thank you very much.
I don't believe there's any other actions or anything necessary coming out of executive session in reference to the nano stuff. Item 12, we already did that. Item 13, future board member agenda items. As always, you don't have to tell them tonight.
Are we gonna do anything with F? There's no action on it. No action?
No action.
There was no motion, therefore it died. Motion, sorry. Item 13, future board member agenda items. Are there any agenda items that need to be placed on the agenda tonight? Please state. Otherwise, you can reach out to Randy and have them added to that, or to Ray to have them added to the agenda. It only takes one board member. It does not take two board members now to have an agenda item added. You can also send them in to Hannah, and she can take care of that as well. Yes, Ms. Shields.
All right, as stated earlier, I just want to restate. If we can have all the backup material in our digital copies so that we can determine for the digital agenda packets, so that we can determine whether or not we want to print them. They don't have to be on the one that's provided to us here, but if we can please have all the backup material so that we have something to actually.
Staff's acknowledging your request.
Okay, that's it. That's all I wanted to ask for.
Any other new agenda items?
I have an item, I don't know if it's an item, but I'd like some thought process with regards to developing the agenda on distributing the board packets. You know, I know we have a 72-hour requirement. Is there any way we can consider at some point different day, maybe the Wednesday before Monday? Because staff can just give some idea how that would work.
Well, you should mention that Randy came to me earlier today and basically told me that he'd like to revise how we do this. So draft agenda will be prepared on Tuesday prior to the board and trustees meeting. That's 1 week prior after the board of managers meet on Wednesday. Final draft will be completed Thursday morning at 9 a.m. The executive committee will finalize the agenda. No more agenda items will be added. Then at 12 noon, the completed finalized agenda will be printed. So we're trying to get this tightened up so there's more time.
I understand. And I have to stress out staff as well.
Yeah.
That's what.
This way we're not running around Friday afternoons at 4 o'clock trying to resolve the agenda item.
Yeah.
We can just send that out.
Driving the staff nuts, driving everybody nuts. All right. Motion to adjourn. So moved. It is 9:42. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Megan's coming around here.